Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's build video, I have something that I've wanted to build for a while, a basic set of samurai armor. But even though it has a very traditional look to it, it's still made out of HD foam. And because of the complexity of this particular build, it is of course going to be split up into multiple videos. Part 1 is going to go all over the construction of the Menpo and the neck guard, and as you can see, I've already started to prototype the helmet, but it's not quite ready. That's going to be part 2. And if you guys are enjoying this particular series, be sure to comment down below, and I may go ahead and finish off the chest and the shoulder armor and everything else. So if that's something you want to see, be sure to let me know. Now, this of course is made all out of my HD foam, which you can find over at Blick Art Materials, and there are links in the description section. And yes, I do have free PDF files for this available over on my website, so if you want to build your own set, feel free. Go over there, download it, build right along with me, because I've always thought it would be really cool to have a set of samurai armor along with all my other costumes set up in my basement. So I want to show you what it takes to put this Menpo together. Let's go ahead and get started. To start this mask, I'm going to take part A and transfer and cut that out of some 6mm foam. I rough cut the inside of the mouth, but I'm going to clean this up with my rotary tool. A smooth sanding drum on my rotary tool does a great job smoothing out the foam, but also rounding over all the edges. With the shape of the mouth complete, I can now take my heat gun and start to heat and manipulate the foam. Part B is going to make up the middle of the mask, and this is going to be cut out of some 4mm foam. Traditional masks would have this section removable, and while mine won't, I still want it to have that appearance. Notice that I'm curving the foam while I'm gluing it into place. This will help make sure that the mask retains this shape. To make up a detail on the cheek, part C is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. This piece is also going to be curved while being glued into place. And here you can see how all those pieces glued together will contour to my face and they won't go flat. Part D is going to make up a detail that's going to go across the lower jaw and the chin. This is going to be cut out of some 4mm foam. Just like all the rest of these pieces, you want to attach this while the foam is curved. That's going to help strengthen and curve the lower part of this mask. To make the lips for the mask, I'm going to cut a couple of small strips of 2mm foam. Using some Bob Smith super glue, these are going to be glued around the perimeter of the mouth and also along the top edge. And the foam is thin enough that it should easily curve to match these shapes. Part E is going to make up a detail on either side of the mouth, and this is going to be cut out of some 2mm foam. Now, just like all my other builds, you can manipulate these pieces or not add them at all. Do what you want for your mask. The nose is going to be made up of multiple stacked pieces, and I'm going to start by using parts F and G. These are going to be cut out of some 4mm foam. After both pieces have been rounded over and heat sealed, the tip of part F is glued slightly above the upper lip. Then additional glue can be applied to the sides and the top, and this piece can be pressed onto part B. This same gluing process is going to be applied to part G. The tip is going to be glued to the bottom of the nose. And then more adhesive is added, and this piece just rounds up part F. To cover the seams of the nose and to add an additional detail, part H is going to be cut out of some 2mm foam. This piece is going to be glued to the center of the nose and up the bridge, giving it a slight curve. To continue the cheek detail onto the front of the mask, part I is going to be traced and cut out of some 2mm foam. Now again, I want this front section to look as though it could be removed, so I leave a decent sized gap on either side. And again, to make this piece look functional, I used my leather punch to add 2 small foam rivets. To bulk out the bottom of the chin, part J is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. This piece can then be sanded, heat sealed, and then glued into place. To match the aesthetic of my mask, I'm going to add part K on top of the chin. This piece is also traced and cut out of some 2mm foam before being glued into place. And here you can see with just a few pieces of foam, the mask is really coming together. Now the neck guard was an absolute pain to figure out, so be thankful that you have these templates available. So I'm going to take parts L, M, N, and O and transfer all those onto some 4mm foam, also making sure to mark all of the holes for the lacing. Just like you've seen me do with multiple projects in the past, I'm going to cut some strips of 2mm foam. And these are going to be glued to the backside of all the neck guard pieces to make sure that they retain that curved shape. And it doesn't really need to be pretty because no one's going to see the backside of this armor. Part P is going to make up a detail rim that's going to go across the bottom, and this is going to be traced and cut out of some 2mm foam. This piece is going to be glued to the bottom of part O, and any additional foam can be cut away from either side. Just like the lips on this mask, additional strips of 2mm foam are going to be cut out and then glued along the perimeter of all these armored pieces. These are going to add a nice detail for now, but are really going to pop once this piece is painted. This process is going to be applied to all 4 neck guard pieces, and any additional foam that you have can now be sanded flush. After a quick heat seal, additional strips of 2mm foam can be added to the bottom of parts L, M, and N. Now I've got some small seams that I don't really like, so I'm going to take some additional foam and wrap it around the corners. And this is a great process because it's covering a seam and giving you an additional detail. Now I'm going to punch all the pilot holes using a small scribe, making sure to go all the way through the foam. By punching through, these are going to give me a great registration to either use a drill bit, or in this case, I'm going to be using my heat tool. My heat tool is set to the highest temperature, and I slowly work my way through each piece. Now if you notice, I have a fan blowing in the back, and I am definitely wearing my respirator because the fumes that come off of this are not good. Now these holes did take quite a while, but it is definitely worth the process. Once again, using my leather punch, I add some small faux rivets to the bottom and sides of part P. Now I'd like my foam to have a little bit of texture, so I'm going to be doing the tinfoil technique. In this case, I'm going to be lightly heating up the foam and then pressing some tinfoil into the surface to emboss it. After the foil has been pressed in, I'll then go back over it with a little bit more heat, and this will soften those overall details. Now I feel this texture is important because a lot of the traditional samurai armor was made out of iron and leather and then covered with a lacquer. Now I want to add some super simple teeth to my mask, so I'm going to take part Q and cut some strips out of 2mm foam. These pieces are slightly curved for the top and the bottom and can be easily glued to the back side. To attach the elastic straps to the mask, part R is going to be cut out of 4mm foam and glued to the back side. The elastic is going to be cut to length and then sandwiched in between parts R and part A. This is going to make sure that the elastic does not pull away from the foam, and it's going to give it a really strong bond. With the mask and all the neck plates fabricated, I can now start to add my primer, which is going to consist of 3 light coats of Plasti-Dip. Before I forget, I did add some small scrap pieces to the back of the armor to make them easier to hold. For a paint primer base, I'm going to be using some Krylon Red Oxide. As you can tell, it's just lightly dusted onto the surface. If you add it too thick, it will crack. For my acrylics, I'm going to start by using Liquitex Heavy Body Red Oxide. By keeping it a completely dry brush method, I'm just hitting the highlights, making sure all those details that I put into the foam really stand out. To add some color variation, I'm going to be incorporating some Liquitex Cadmium-Free Red Medium. This is going to be gradually added to the red oxide and selectively placed onto the armor and the mask. It may not look like much, but it makes a huge difference in the props not looking quite so flat. To age and weather these pieces, I'm going to be using some Dirty Down Dark Brown. These spray paints are available through Goblin's Hut, and I have a link and promotional code down in the video description. These sprays are really cool because not only will they go and start to darken all my colors up, but unlike a traditional wash, I can then go back in with some water, rehydrate it, and wipe away additional paints. And all I'm using is the mop brush, some water, and a damp paper towel to remove the pigment. This really allows me to be selective with how much dirt and grime I want to leave on my props and costumes. Now it's time to address all of the borders on the armor, and to do that I'm going to be using Golden Brand Iridescent Bronze. This is going to be applied with a small filbert brush and a minimal amount of water. Notice that I'm still allowing some of that red to show through. Just like I had done with the red parts, I'm going to add a highlight layer using Utrecht Brand Iridescent Gold. Again, having just a slight hue difference between this and the Golden Brand, these different values give the prop more dimension and really help sell the overall believability of the prop's age. Again, I'm going to say you don't have to use my particular color scheme. Feel free to paint this however you'd like. To lace the armor, I went through Shoelace Express. I purchased some flat, tubular, athletic 5/16 shoelaces. This product is sold by the spool, which consists of 144 yards, and I bought a couple of them just in case I do all of the armor. The way this armor is going to weave, it's going to cross at the top and come down through the bottom two holes into the next piece of armor. And I did burn each end of the shoelace just to make it easier to go through the holes. When I get to the next piece of armor, it's the same exact thing, crisscross, and then down through the bottom. This is done all the way down to part O. At that crisscross, I stopped. And then the lacing process began again at the top, going down the next set of rows. Once I completed all the crisscross lacing, I could then work at the holes at the bottom of part O. The lacing will just go in and out all across the piece. Once completed, I would burn the ends and then hot glue those into place. For the lacing on part P, I started off with a straight lace down and then crisscrossed all the way to the opposite side. It took quite a while, but the detail of these steps looks pretty good in the end. Now I need to attach the neck guard to the mask, and to do that I'm going to be using some 550 paracord. I removed the middle strands and burned the edges to make them easier to insert. And just like before, I poked some holes in the top of part L and pushed the paracord through. These strands are going to be super glued to the back side of the mask with a little swatch of 2mm foam on top to secure them. This will make sure that the armor is actually pretty flexible and easy to wear. In my opinion, the gold was looking a little too clean, so I'm going to be using some Dirty Down Rust paint. Just like the sprays, this is water soluble, so I can put it down and then use some water to move it around if necessary. In this case, I painted it onto the surface using a detail brush, but after it had dried, I went back over some of those rusty areas with more iridescent gold. This again just gives it a layered look to the weathering and makes it look a lot more believable. At this point, with the gold and the red looking pretty weathered but the laces looking brand new, I knew I needed to do something else. So I got out some Fuller's Earth Dust and dusted the laces and the surface. This is going to knock down some of that gloss on the laces, plus also get down into some of the nooks and crannies where dust would build up. It's just another step of adding a believability to the prop that I'm making. So you all can see the basic steps that I took to put together my own Menpo and neck guard for part 1 in this samurai build. Be sure to swing back by for part 2, where I finish fabricating the rest of the helmet. And like I said in the beginning, if you would like to see a full set of samurai armor along with some free PDFs for that, be sure to comment that down below, and if I get enough response, it might be a project that I completely take on. Now, if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKSProps on Twitter and Instagram because I want to see your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best. HD foam.